Hello, today we are doing 6.2, which is solving inequalities using multiplication and division. So first we have 4 inequalities here, and we are going to figure out what happens to the inequality when we multiply by a positive and a negative number, or divide by a positive or a negative number. So for all of these, we are going to use the number 2, and we're just going to multiply by 2 or divide by 2. So we have the inequality 5 is less than 6, which is true right now. So I'm just going to put t there, that's true. But if I multiply this by a positive number, so think of this as an equation, if I multiply by 2, I have 10 is less than 6, which is true. Oops, I did not 6, 12. 6 times 2 is 12. 10 is less than 12, that is still true. But what happens when I multiply by a negative? I'm going to do that still under here. If I have 5 is less than 6, and I multiply by a negative 2, we get negative 10 is less than negative 12. Now if you're not sure, think of your number line for negatives. Negative 10, negative 11, negative 12, because 0 is over here. We go negative to the left. Is negative 10 less than negative 12? And that would be no, it's not true. That would be false. So when we multiplied by a negative, that's not true. To make this true, we would have to flip our symbol here and say that negative 10 is really greater or closer to the positives than negative 12. Let's try the same thing with a negative inequality. Right now it says negative 5 is less than negative 3, which is true because negative 5 would be closer to the left side, closer to the negatives. Negative 3 is closer to the positives. So that is true right now. If we multiply by a positive, we still have negative 10 is less than negative 6, which is true. This number is further to the left. Still true when we multiply by a positive. But if we multiply by a negative, multiply by negative 2 times negative 2, we get 10 is less than 6. Well, that doesn't make any sense. That would be false. It's not true. So in order to make it true, we would have to flip our symbol and say 10 is greater than 6. So right now, if we multiply by a negative, we really need to flip our symbol, flip the inequality symbol in order to make a true statement. Let's look at division now. If we take this inequality, 4 is less than 8, which is true, and we divide by a positive, if we divide by 2, we'd get 2 is less than 4, which is still true. So if we divide by a positive number, we're good. Same thing here, if we start out with negatives, if we divide by 2, we get negative 4 is less than negative 3, which is true. It's further to the left. It's less than negative 3. So that's still true. But if we divide by a negative, I'm just going to copy these down. If we divide by a negative, like divide by negative 2, divide by negative 2, we'd get negative 2 is less than negative 4, which if you think of our number line, negative 2 is not less than negative 4, it's greater, it's closer to the positives. So again, in order to make it true, we'd have to flip our symbol around. Negative 2 is greater than negative 4. Same thing over here. If I divide by a negative 2, we'd get 4 is less than 3. 4 is not less than 3, 4 is greater than 3. So we'd again have to flip our symbol. So with all this being said, these examples, if you multiply or divide by a negative, you have to change the direction of our inequality symbol. That is our rule for when you multiply or divide by a negative number. So let's look at some examples here. Here's 3 inequalities that we need to solve in graph. This is multiplied by negative 3, so I need to divide by negative 3. Well, for dividing by a negative, our symbol needs to flip. So we have k is less than negative 7. So we put negative 7 on our number line. 0 would be over here. So negative 6, negative 8. This will be an open circle because it's not equal to, just like an L, less than. And less than, if you can put a line in here, points to the left. Negative 8 is less than negative 7. This next one, we have m divided by 4 is greater than or equal to negative 6. To get rid of dividing by 4, we multiply by 4. We are multiplying by a positive number. The number we are choosing to multiply by, because it's on the bottom, is positive. So we keep the symbol the same. Even though this is negative, that has nothing to do with it. That number was already there. So we have m is greater than or equal to negative 24. So this one is a closed circle pointing to the right. Greater than would be towards the positive numbers. Next, this is multiply by 2, so we need to divide by 2. We're dividing by a positive number, so our symbol stays the same. But we can't graph like this. Our letter's not on the left, so we need to flip-flop the whole equation, whole inequality. Alligator's eating the x, so when we flip it, it still needs to be eating the x. 12, 13, 14. We have an open circle because there's no equal to. It's just greater than 13. Numbers greater than 13 will be towards 14, to the right. All right, let's flip over to the back side and do a couple more problems with division. Solving this inequality, this one says divide by 3, so the opposite would be multiply by 3. Those eliminate. We have x. We have negative 24 on this side, and our symbol stays the same because we multiplied by 3. We did not multiply by a negative. Okay? Our symbol's not flipping. So again, we have negative 24. 0 would be over here, so negative 23, negative 25. Open circle because there's no equal to. And then greater than would be to the right towards the positive, 0. This is the exact same problem, but a little bit different because we have divide by a negative, so to get rid of that we need to multiply it by negative 3. We did multiply by negative, so our symbol flips. So we have x is less than 8 times 3 is 24, negative 24. So same setup, same symbol, except this one is less than, which is to the left. This next one is really just an equation. Nothing much to do here. This is a review from yesterday. We subtract 8 on both sides, and we get y equals 21 minus 8, which is 13. And we would just have 13 on our number line. Just a dot. We're just equal to 13, not less than or greater than. One more just like that. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. We're dividing by 7. X equals a negative 7 because 7 times 7 is 49. So on our number line, we would just have a circle at negative 7. Oops. I don't know why that stopped writing. Here's a couple more inequalities. Review from yesterday. This is just adding and subtracting. Add 9 to both sides to get x by itself. When we add and subtract, we do not flip the symbols ever, only when you multiply or divide by a negative. So 15 plus 9 is 24. So 23, 24, 25. Be careful though, we can't graph this right away. The letters on the left, we got to flip-flop it. So we're going to have x, and then alligator's eating the x, so it still needs to be when you flip it. That means we have a closed circle because of the equal to right here, and arrow pointing to the right. Greater than is to the right. Last one here. The opposite of multiplying by negative 8 is dividing by negative 8. You just heard it. Divide by negative 8 flips our symbol. So we have h is less than or equal to 8. Two negatives make a positive. So close circle at 8, pointing to the left. Less than's to the left. Our last problem is a word problem. It says a student pilot plans to spend 80 hours on flight training to earn a private license. The student has saved $6,000 for training. Which inequality can you use to find the possible hourly rates are that the student can afford to pay for training? So hourly rates are, and this is per hour, and we're spending 80 hours training, and we've saved $6,000, okay? So I like to think of this to start off by saying, he has to spend less than or equal to $6,000 because that's all the money he has to spend. So what needs to be less than or equal to $6,000? Well, his training, and he needs to spend 80 hours on training, multiplied by whatever it costs. Oh, excuse me. 80 hours on training multiplied by whatever the rate is, R. So our 80R has to be less than or equal to $6,000. Which, if you just look at that equation that we just wrote right here, we don't need to flip it around or anything. It matches this one right here. So our answer is going to be B. If we look at the other options, they say 80 times the rate would be greater than or equal to $6,000. We don't want to spend greater than $6,000. We don't have that kind of money. This one says our $6,000 we're going to multiply by the hourly rate. Well, we're not going to take money times money to give us hours. That doesn't make any sense. And the last one is similar. It says $6,000 for training times how many hours we're going to be there has to be less than or equal to 80. Also doesn't make any sense. So always start with how much you have to spend total, and you can say it's less than or equal to that number. And this is actually just a fun fact over here. Jonathan Strickland, who's the youngest black pilot at age 14, he set the world record for piloting 6 airplanes and 1 helicopter on the same day. So here is your homework. Some of them have the equal sign, so it's just going to be a dot. But the rest you're going to have to draw your line down